So we're going to have another assignment this week. It's going to be on some more trigonometry. This is a worksheet that's going to be involved. It's going to be involving the law of cosines. What is the law of cosines? Well, law of cosines is used to find the lengths of sides and the measure of angles of any triangle. So it does not have to be a right triangle. You know, if it was a right triangle, then you could use Pythagorean theorem, or we could use one of the SOHCAHTOA ratios in order to find those things. But if it's a normal triangle or a regular triangle, something that may be obtuse or acute, and we didn't have that option, well, now we do using the law of cosines. We would use law of cosines to find the length of a side if we know side, angle, side. So what that means is I would use the law of cosines if, for example, I need to find the length of this side, the third side. Can't use Pythagorean theorem. It's not a right triangle. So to find that, as long as I have the other two sides and the angle that's included between those two sides. So side, angle, side. So that's what that means. If I wanted to find the measure of an angle, and I needed to use the law of cosines, it would be if I had the length of all three of the sides. So that's what I have here. All right. So again, let's go ahead and do these two examples once we talk about what is the law of cosine. So we have this regular triangle. When I say regular, that's not actually accurate. It's just looks like an obtuse triangle. And I've labeled it ABC. I've also labeled the sides opposite the vertices, the lowercase of that letter. So side opposite of A would be lowercase a, and so on. So if that's the case, all right, so what I'm looking at is this formula, all right? So memorizing this formula is the toughest part. I would make sure right now that you get a piece of paper and you write down this formula and write down a triangle similar to this. So that way when you do your assignment, you'll have it to look at, all right? So if I wanted to find, for example, the length of this side, that means I would have to know the length of this side, the measure of that angle, and the length of this side. That's the only way I could use the law of cosines to make this happen, all right? So if I'm going to find this, it's simply going to be a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2 times this times the cosine of this angle. And that's it. And once I plug that in, do some manipulation, do a little bit of arithmetic, should be good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and put this into practice. So find the length of AB. So my unknown is here. All right, and we'll call it C, okay, because it's opposite of the vertex C. So now it's just a matter of plugging it in or using that formula. So since it's not A, B, and C like it was on that triangle, I'm going to make this a C, I'm going to make this an A, and we'll be okay. All right. So I'm going to go C squared equals 24 squared plus 27 squared minus 2 times 24 times 27 times the cosine of 107. Okay? So that's all I did was I just used that formula, plug that information in. This is my unknown. I knew these two sides. I apply those back again in this part of the formula, and then we go from there. All right, so clean this up. So I'm going to have c squared equals, use probably the same calculator you guys have. So 24 squared, 576, 27 squared, 729, minus, and then I'm going to go ahead and multiply those things out. So 2 times 24 times 27, 1296, 1296, and then that's times the cosine of 107. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to add these two. They're just normal constants. I can't add that with this because this is attached to this expression by multiplication. So it's like these aren't like terms. These two are like terms, but they're not alike with this because this has the cosine of 107, so I can't just add them or subtract. So go ahead and add these together here. So we're looking at 576 plus 729, 1305, minus 1296 cosine 107. Okay. So now I have this right side as cleaned up as it possibly can. Now I'm ready just to punch it in. How do I get c by itself? I got to take the square root of both sides. Okay, and just pay attention to how I do this. Because when I type it in, it's going to give me a parentheses. I want to make that, I have that first. I'm going to type all this stuff in. And then when I hit the cosine button, it's going to be another set of parentheses. So I'm going to end with two sets of parentheses, one to end the angle and one to end the square root part. All right, so this is what I'm going to type in. All right, so hit square root, 1305 minus 1296, cosine, and now it's looking for another angle, 107, end parentheses for the cosine, or for the angle, end parentheses for the square root. And my answer ends up being 41. Now it says round to the nearest tenth, but I don't need to round that because it's 41.0. So you're looking at C is about 41.0. And they said find the length of AB. So AB, 41.0 meters. Make sure you label that. That's how we do it. Okay. So that's what we end up getting. Now, a little bit tougher to find the measure of an angle. Again, we're still going to use that same formula. But my unknown, when I punch all that stuff in, when I write my equation, is going to be here. All right, so all these will have numbers, and then I'm going to, at the very end, I'll have to solve for A in order to get the answer. So here we go. All right, so they want me to find the measure of angle A. Okay, and looking at the formula, A is here. That means the side opposite of A is the one on the outside of the equal sign. All right, so I'm going to start with 13 squared because that's opposite of the angle I need to find. Let me just keep going here. Again, all this is typing or punching, just everything into the formula. And then cosine of A. I don't know what that is, so that's all I can do. Okay. Now this is a bunch of arithmetic. Clean it up. So this is 169 equals 441 plus, I don't know what 29 squared is. 29 squared, 841 minus, multiply this stuff. So 2 times 21 times 29. Make sure I type that. Okay. So, okay. So now again, I'm going to add these, clean it up. So 441 plus 841, 1282. Okay, I'm trying to get A all by itself. Again, I can't add or subtract these because this one, they're not like terms. This 1218 has the cosine A attached to it by multiplication. It doesn't have the same thing here. So I need to get everything on that other side. So subtract this from both sides. 169 minus 1282. Okay, and then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1218. And that's going to give me, I'm going to switch this side. So cosine of A equals negative divided by negative is positive. So 1,113 over 1218. Okay, I'm getting really close here. I got to get A all by itself. So at this point, I'm going to do cosine inverse of both sides. Oops, cosine inverse. So A is about, because once I type this in, it's going to be rounded. So all right, so cosine inverse. All right, so make sure I type that in right. And then I'm going to end up rounding that to the nearest degree. Well, actually it says to the nearest tenth, but if I go look, I'd have to look at this one, which punch that up. So we're looking at 24. So the measure of angle A is about 24 degrees. And that's how we use law of cosines to find the measure of an angle.